Wildcards are one of the most valuable resources you're ever going to get in Magic Arena because they can be used to become any other card that you want to build your decks. So, to get the most out of Arena, you need to know what wildcards are, how to get more of them, and how you can spend them wisely. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go through everything you need to know about wildcards, so don't forget to like this video if you find it helpful and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos like this. So, wildcards. They are the best way to get any card you want because you can change them into pretty much anything. So we have different wildcards. We have common wildcards, uncommon wildcards, rare and mythic rare that correspond to the rarities of the cards. We're going to cover the basics first and then we're going to go into some different things on how to use them and how to get the most out of them. So yeah, we can turn them into different cards with different rarities. Now, common and uncommon cards and wild cards are easier to come by, which is why you would normally have lots more common and uncommon wild cards than rare and mythic rare. At the moment, I've been crafting a lot of decks recently, so I don't have very many rare, mythic rare wild cards left, and I'm going to start building them up again when the new set comes out. So, if you want to get a common, uncommon, rare, or mythic rare card that you don't have already, you can go to build a deck and you can add the cards in and you can see which ones you don't have by clicking on this craft button over here. So I can see that we don't have this card. We can craft it. It's an uncommon, and if we wanted to, we just click on it. We click craft. I'm not going to use this one because this one's not playable in standard. But if we want to just have a look at only ones that are in standard, and in fact, if you're crafting wildcards, if you're using wildcards to craft other cards, at the moment it's probably best to stick to anything from Dominaria onwards, because everything from Innistrad to Streets of New Capenna will only be standard legal, if you're focused on standard, will only be standard legal until September 2024, and all these other ones will last another year after that. But it's still a year to use these, so it's not terrible. If you want to craft any of those cards, then go ahead. But yeah, let's just have a look at standard. So we'll look at all the standards. So these are all the cards in standard that I can craft. I can even actually go to ones I've not collected, and I can see these are literally the only cards in standard I don't have at least one of. So I've got quite a lot in my collection. I could craft these, although I probably won't use those ones. Let's have a look at maybe not ones I haven't collected at all. Let's go to lands. So lands, and so these are the lands, all the lands, ones I have, and if I didn't have any, they would be able to see them here by clicking on not collected or clicking on the craft option up here. And if I find one that I want to have, so let's say I really want to have another Battlefield Forge, which I probably do actually for one of my decks. So I've only got 4 rare wild cards at the moment. I've got 3 unlocked. I need a 4th one. I'm going to craft that one. And now I have 4 copies of it. There you go, I've got 4. And now I only have 3 rare wild cards left. So you can do this for any card that you want to get, which is why these are so valuable. The commons and uncommons are easier to unlock, which I'll show you in my collection. If you look at my set collection, for most of the sets, you'll find that maybe yours is the same as this. That commons and uncommons, I have almost 4 copies of everything, and some of them I do have 4 copies. There you go, I've got 4 copies of all the commons in Phyrexia. But for the rares and mythic rares, I don't have 4 copies, quite a lot of the different cards. So a lot of them, you'll find the rares and the mythics aren't near the end of this, where the commons and uncommons are much nearer the end. And if you go back further to sets before, when I wasn't collecting as much or playing as much, I don't even have 1 copy of all of the mythics and rares from some of these sets. So the mythics and rares are harder to collect, and the wild cards come up less often. So we need to be really careful about how we spend our rare and mythic wild cards specifically. I mean, the commons and uncommons, you can probably spend slightly more carefree and just use them whenever you want to. The rares and mythic rares are the ones we need to really be careful of. So let's talk about how you get more wildcards. Now, one way we can get more wildcards is by opening packs. So whenever we open a pack, which I might have to get a pack just to show you, whenever we open a pack, this wildcard wheel up here and this one up here both turn around. So we have 6 spaces around here. We're going to get an uncommon wildcard for every 6 packs we open, and we will get a mythic or rare wildcard for every 6 packs we open as well. This will change from mythic rare to a normal regular rare, and then after a few times it will go back to mythic rare as well. So the mythic ones are quite harder to come by compared to the rare ones, but the rare ones tend to get used more because there tends to be more rare cards in a set that are useful and playable in different decks compared to mythics. That's just how it seems to be. So yeah, you kind of want to be careful about rares and mythic rares, although you get them at different rates. And I'm going to show you now, as a pack has just appeared in my account, I'm going to show you now when I open a pack, these will go around and they'll advance and we'll get another uncommon card. We might also get wild cards inside the pack as well. So we'll see if we do in this one. Okay, that's the uncommon wild card that came by. We didn't get any in this pack, but normally you'll get in a pack maybe a common or uncommon wild card in most of them, and then sometimes this rare or mythic slot will be a rare or mythic wild card as well. So that's one way you can collect them, through the packs and through opening packs as well. And if you want to know specifically what the rates of getting certain wild cards in the packs are, Wizards of the Coast have actually published this anyway. They say that for common wildcards, you're likely to get 1 in every 3 packs that you open. For uncommon wildcards, it's 1 in every 5 packs that you open. And in rare and mythic wildcards, you are likely to get them in 1 in every 30 packs you open. I haven't tracked exactly what mine happens to be, but if that's what they've published it as, there's a good chance that even if I took an average of mine, it's going to be basically the same as that. And when we get golden packs, when you buy 10 packs in the store and you get a golden pack, opening the golden pack will also advance the wildcard track progress over here, but you won't get wildcards in the golden pack unless that changes in the future. You will just get duplicate protected rares and mythics from standard legal sets. So the only way you get wildcards from golden packs is from this wildcard track advancing. You do also have the option of buying wildcards in the store directly for real money. So for $10 you can get 4 rare wildcards, and for $20 you can get 4 mythic wildcards. I have an old video that goes over when these are worth spending actual money on, rather than getting them from gems or coins in gold or opening packs. And the short answer, without going into all the detail, is that these are only worth it if you need wildcards for crafting cards from non-standard legal sets, because it's much easier if you want to get specific cards from standard legal sets. You can open the packs, you can get golden packs, you get them from ICRs, individual card rewards, but it's harder to get historic rares and mythic rares. So if you really need to have certain ones to fill out a certain deck, then you can buy the wildcards. But I wouldn't recommend it in the majority of cases. There are probably much better things you could do with your money than buy wildcards directly. We're probably better off being careful about how we spend wildcards and making sure we don't waste any. And unless you just want to spend money on it, it's better just to save and be cautious with the wildcards you use, and then we'll get more out of them. You can also technically get wildcards from doing draft events, because in the rewards for the draft events you can get packs, and in those packs you might find wildcards from opening them, and they will also move the wildcard track progress around, so you can get more just from opening the packs. So technically, if you get 7 wins in a Premier draft, you get 6 packs, you're going to at least get 1 uncommon and 1 rare or mythic wildcards from the track progress, and probably a couple of other wildcards in those packs when you open them. But compared to just buying the packs, you're going to get less if you rely on getting them from draft events. But you will get some if you do the Premier draft events or the quick draft events. You get more packs as rewards in Premier drafts, so if you're trying to maximize drafts and wildcards, Premier draft is going to be better, as long as you get on average 3 wins or more. If you find that you don't do so well in drafts, if you want to do drafts, quick draft would be better for you. But to be honest, if you're not very good at drafts, it's probably better just buying packs. It just depends on what you want to do, really. The other way we can get more wildcards is from the vault progress. So you can see up here we have a vault, On mine it says 122.8%. Now this goes up whenever you open an uncommon or common card that you already have 4 copies of, or you might get it from an individual card reward from a daily win or from the mastery pass. When you get an uncommon card that you already have 4 copies of, this goes up by 0.3%, and when you get a common card that you already have 4 copies of, this goes up by 0.1%. So this goes up very slowly. When you get rare and mythic duplicates, when you already have 4 of them, then you don't get any vault progress for that. You get gems instead of getting vault progress. You just get gems. 20 gems for a 5th copy of a rare card and 40 gems for a 5th copy of a mythic card. So this can only go up by getting extra common and uncommon cards that you already have 4 of, and it goes up pretty slowly. So at the moment I have 122%, which means when it gets to 100% you can open it, and in the vault you have 1 mythic rare wildcard, 2 rare wildcards, and 3 uncommon wildcards. Now, bearing in mind, to open the vault, you need to have a lot of duplicate uncommon cards. Getting 3 uncommon wildcards feels like nothing in comparison. The vault progress is so slow, but at least it's something. So you'll get 1 mythic wildcard, 2 rare wildcards for having hundreds or thousands of extra cards that you don't need. But at least there's something. So when you open this, it will give you the rewards. So those are the rewards we've got now. So we can claim them, and now the vault's disappeared because it's now at 22.8%. So when we get more duplicate commons and uncommons, that vault progress will go up. And we can see now that I've got a few extra uncommon wildcards. I've now got 5 rare and 2 mythic rare. Oh, and it says the vault progress there. There you go, 22.8%. It didn't used to say that. I'm sure it didn't used to tell you how much you had. But you can also click on the wildcards up there, and it will show you the whole thing. So it goes up slowly, but at least it's something we get from them. We get some more rares and mythics. So the value of the rare and mythic wildcards is really high. We don't want to use wildcards if we don't have to. So what you need to do, if you haven't done this already, you need to make sure you've unlocked all of the starter decks, because inside the starter decks, there are some rare and mythic cards. Now, for instance, the Rampaging Raptor. If you have one of those already in your collection, like if you've crafted it before you've unlocked the starter decks, then you won't get another copy of this. This will only give you enough copies you need to fill out this deck. So if you unlock the deck first, you'll get one for free, and then if you want to craft one afterwards, you'll have 2 instead of 1. So it's much better to try to unlock as much as possible before using your wildcards, because in some cases those wildcards will just be wasted if you use them too early. And also, when a new set comes out, if you want to make the best use of your wildcards, you don't want to use them to craft cards from the new set straight away. The better thing to do would be to do any draft events you want to do first. They should always come first. Premier Draft usually comes out when a new set is launched for that set, so you can Premier Draft from day 1. Normally, Quick Draft comes out 2 weeks after the launch of a set. It might be sometimes 1 week, so have a look at the schedule. Somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks after a set being launched, you could do Quick Draft. So you have to wait a little bit longer to do that, which is one reason why I do Premier Draft as much as possible. The reason for that is because when you collect rare or mythic cards from a Premier Draft or Quick Draft event, if you already have 4 copies of that rare or mythic card, then you're only going to get those 20 or 40 gems, and you won't get the actual card, and unlocking the cards tends to be more valuable because later on, when you've done all the draft events you want to do and you have a lot of packs to open, when you come to open all of your packs, the rares and mythics in the packs are duplicate protected. So if you're going to open a Shield Red and you already have 4 copies of it, it won't be a Shield Red, it won't give you gems, it will give you a different card of the same rarity from that set. So if you want to fill out as many rares and mythics as possible, you want to do drafts and open your packs as late as you want to, as late as you can. Hold on for as long as possible. I don't wait till the end of a set because that's just too long to wait for me. I wait until I've done all of my draft events, and then I open lots of packs, which gives me lots of wildcards and gives me lots of extra cards from that set. And then you'll have lots of wildcards to use that you might want to craft new cards from the new set, or other standard legal cards that you want to fill out certain decks. So if you happen to have a deck that you want to craft more cards from, so I've got an example here of an Esper Legends deck. I don't have all the cards that might be required for an Esper Legends deck. I only have 3 copies of Skrelv. If I wanted to play this deck, I could have a look at the cards I'm missing, which are the ones here that are darker, and I could see how many wild cards I need. So this is a rare, this is rare, this is mythic, and this is rare. And then we have some of the lands as well, which are normally rares for a lot of these really good 2-color lands that come in untapped most of the time. So we have lots of things. Now I could click craft all. At the moment, I don't have enough wild cards for this because we need to have at least 3 mythics here. We need rares. I only have 5 rares and 2 mythics, so I can't craft the whole thing. But what you might want to do, if you have a deck that you want to be able to use, you could either just take out, if possible, any of the cards that aren't that you can make do without, and then just fill in with the lands, just fill in the other common or uncommon, the common lands that you have, or basic lands that you have, and fill in anything you happen to have that can fill the space in that deck. And then once you unlock more rare and mythic wildcards, you can go back and add another one of the card that you want, and then just go and craft that. Another way to look at what things you might want to craft first is having a look at very versatile cards. So there are some cards that are not very versatile. Like you wouldn't put an arcane bombardment in every red deck that you have. This would only work in an arcane bombardment deck because it's pretty much the focal point of a deck, because it's an expensive enchantment that does a very specific thing that needs to have lots of spells. You need to be able to ramp into it. You might want to protect it. There's lots of things that you would build around this enchantment that make it only good for that deck. But then there are other cards that might fit into maybe any black deck you have. You might want to have a shield red, for example. There might be lots of decks that use some black where you might want to have specific removal. There might be lots of decks that use multiple colors where you want to be able to discard things, ramp, create treasure tokens. So these cards you might want to use in a variety of decks. There might be some that could fit into almost any deck that isn't a very fast aggro deck. So like Celestus is a really good card for filtering through your deck, creating mana, and ramping slightly, because you're getting basically an extra mana from that on turn 3. So you can basically skip a turn and build up your mana a little bit faster. So there's lots of cards that you might want to use in a variety of decks. Now it's much better for you to craft a shield red or a big score or a Celestus than necessarily an arcane bombardment, unless you know you want to play an arcane bombardment deck. When you're just starting out, it's probably better for you to play in the starter deck duel format to start with, because you don't want to play against other people using really top tier decks against your starter decks. If you're using the starter decks, it's much better for you to play against other starter deck players. So this is where you want to go if you are just starting out and you don't have enough wildcards. You might just want to play with the starter decks to start with. They're fine, they're quite fun to play with. And then you can build up your gold or your gems to maybe buy some packs or enter the draft events, to then start building your collection and eventually get more wildcards that you can craft specific things. Now there are budget decks that you can build that are pretty effective against people in the normal ranked queue or the standard play queue. You can look up a variety of these budget decks. I have a few on videos previously on this channel, and you can look up my profile. I can have a link in the description for my EtherHub profile where you can see a few different budget decks that I've made that work pretty well. Here's one example of a budget deck that I made on the channel very recently. Now this uses basically whatever rare or mythic big creatures you have in the colors of black, red, or green. And then we have mostly, I think everything else is common or uncommon and is just there to discard, remove the opponent's things, discard these creatures into the graveyard and bring them back as early as turn 5, maybe earlier if we're lucky. So this kind of deck could work no matter what big creatures you have. If you have something like an Atali, it works pretty well because you get to steal something of the opponent's as well. But any big creatures you have, like Toxrill, Atali, Titan of Industry, Tyrannax Rex, anything like that, you could put in this kind of deck and you might not even need to craft any other big creature cards, because you could just use pretty much what you have and just find ways to build decks around that. Now, the lands we use in this deck are just the common lands. If you happen to have more rare wildcards, you could craft the different 2-color lands or 3-color lands that would fit this style of deck as well. In fact, if you've got a specific color or combination of colors that you like to play, it's probably going to be quite effective for you. It might not sound as exciting, but to craft the rare lands that work for those color pairs, because they're going to make your decks much more effective. If you're putting a tapped land out and almost missing a turn because you don't get to cast your big thing straight away, it's going to really affect the deck's effectiveness. It's really going to make it not as good, and you want to obviously make your decks as effective as possible. So if you craft the lands that work well for your deck, then they'll be around for 2 or 3 years. You'll get quite a lot of use out of them, and you'll be glad you had them. And that's probably the best example of crafting a rare card that you can fit into many different decks. If you play lots of green and black, you're going to want as many green and black rare lands as possible to make your decks as effective as possible. But you do also want to consider when rotation happens. So this year, 2023, Standard isn't rotating, it's skipping this year and it's going to rotate next year. So there are quite a few things like Digraph Rebirth, which is only an uncommon. Maybe we'll look at Toxrill, which is a mythic. That's going to rotate out of Standard in September 2024. So if you're getting close to that date, you don't want to craft Toxrill just to use it for a short amount of time. If you're only playing Standard, you're probably going to be better off crafting something that's from March of the Machine. So Titan of Industries from Nuka Penna, that's going to go as well. And Tyrannex Rex is from Phyrexia. So that's going to stay around for another year. So it's important to consider rotation. If you're getting close to a rotation and a card you want to craft is going to be moving out, then you will get a warning in the app, and it will say that this was rotating out soon. Are you sure you want to craft it? So it's good to keep an eye on that. You don't want to craft things that you're only going to get to use for like 6 months or 3 months. It's much better to craft things that you're going to get 2 or 3 years use out of, because obviously the wildcard's going to give you much more value that way. Another smart way to use your wildcards is when there are ban announcements that come out for Standard. So recently, or when this video is being recorded, recently we had Reckoner Bankbuster, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and Invoke Despair were all banned in Standard. But when a ban announcement comes out, you have about a week or so, or a few days, before the ban takes effect. So if you don't have any copies, or if you don't have 4 copies of cards that are announced to be banned, you can craft them all before the ban takes effect. And if you do that, you will then get refunded the wildcards that you spent on these cards when the ban takes effect. So for instance, these were banned in Standard, but they were still legal in Alchemy, and you can still use them in Historic and Explorer and Brawl, and you can still use them in direct challenges against friends if you're just playing each other. So if you don't have any copies of Reckoner Bankbuster and the ban's coming out, you can craft all 4. You then get all 4 wildcards back when the ban happens, and then you still have those 4 cards to use in anything other than Standard. So it's a great way to get cards for free that you can use in other formats if you ever want to do it. There's basically nothing to lose, so if a ban announcement comes out, consider crafting those cards before the ban happens. Another way some people get the most out of their wildcards, when you have lots and lots of common and uncommon wildcards, you might never use them. So I might have all these, and the first thing I would recommend, if you have this many common and uncommon wildcards, is have a look at other formats or other commons and uncommons you actually want. So you might look at cards that are staples in Historic Brawl or Explorer, common decks or artisan decks for those, or pauper decks for different formats, because if you don't have those cards, you might as well craft them. But if you don't have any cards you want to craft from non-standard legal formats, older ones, you don't want any commons or uncommons from those, what you can do to get slight extra benefit from the vault progress is you can have a look at the new set. So let's say March of the Machine's a new set. and we would go to basically not collected, common and uncommon. So we'd have a look at all the cards in the new set. Now I have them, so I'm going to just look at collected. So if we didn't have all of these, in fact, I can probably look at just things I have 1, 2, or 3 of. Okay, so let's say we don't have all of the commons or uncommons from the new set. What we could do is we could go through and we could add them all into a deck. Let's click on them all. So imagine we've got a new set coming out. We don't have any of the cards. We could go and craft all of the cards that we don't have 4 copies of. So you go click craft all. We craft them all. We now have 4 of every common and uncommon in a new set, or as many commons and uncommons from the new set as we can spend our wildcards on. So you end up with 0 commons and uncommons. Then, when you're doing your draft events or opening your packs, it means your vault progress is going to go up a lot faster because you've already filled out all the commons and uncommons. Every single common and uncommon card you get will add to your vault. The vault will go up faster, and when you get there, you'll get an extra mythic wildcard and 2 rare wildcards and the 3 uncommons. It's not very much. It's a very, very small amount of benefit. But if you have all these common and uncommon wildcards and you have nothing else you want to do with them, you might as well do that. You're basically throwing hundreds of the common wildcards to get 1 or 2 rare wildcards back. It's a terrible rate of return, but it's better than nothing. Otherwise, you're just going to have common and uncommon wildcards building up to hundreds or thousands and never being used for anything. So you might as well do that if you have nothing else to use them on. Now there are some things you don't ever want to spend your wildcards on. So if we have a look at, let's go back here, and let's have a look at Obliterator. So we have, with Phyrexian Obliterator, and lots of other cards that are reprints, we have the old version here, and we have the new version here. Now I have 2 copies of the old version and 2 copies of the new version. And when you have reprints like this, you can use the old card, if it's exactly the same card, you can use this in a standard deck. I can make a standard deck, I can put in the Obliterators, and I have 2 of the old ones, 2 of the new ones. Now the thing is, I could still craft more of the new version of Phyrexian Obliterator. If I go to craft, I could spend my wildcards on getting more Obliterators. But I don't need to, because I already have 4 copies overall. I just only have 2 of the new version. Now this means when you open packs of this set, of the Phyrexia set, you might get more Obliterators, even though you already have 4, technically, you can still get 4 of the new set. So they kind of do overlap there. And they're not really duplicate protected in that way. But you want to make sure if you've got any cards from a set, you don't want to craft more than you actually need because you can only ever put 4 in a deck anyway. So if you have some old ones that can be exchanged or used in place of new ones, don't go and craft 4 of the new ones because it's just going to be a waste of your wildcards. And that applies anytime there's a reprint of a card that's exactly the same but just different artwork coming out in a new set. My very last tip for you in using your wildcards is to not stress about it, because there are lots of people that will say the absolute most efficient thing to do with your wildcards, this is true, is to not use any wildcards at all until you've completely finished collecting a set as much as possible. So if I want Phyrexian Obliterators, it's much better for me to open my packs first, because I might open a pack that gets me all the Obliterators that I want, and then those wildcards could go somewhere else if needed. Now, if I craft the Obliterators and then I have 4 of them in my collection, I might then open a pack and then get another Mythic that I'm never going to use because it's just not one that fits into a deck that I want to play. So then that wildcard has effectively been wasted. So technically, that is the best way to use wildcards, is to not use them for as long as humanly possible. But it's really boring to do that, because if I want to play a deck with a Phyrexian Obliterator and I'm waiting to open one in a pack and I have wildcards sitting in my collection, there comes a point where that's just really stupid and you might as well just use 1 or 2 wildcards to craft the card because you want to use it. So you have to balance the most effective thing, the most efficient thing, which is waiting as long as possible, with something that's a bit more fun crafting the card now because you want to use it. So don't stress over when exactly you use wildcards. You want to be as careful as possible with them, but it doesn't mean you can't spend them on anything when you want to. So I have rares and mythics, not very many. I spend them on rare and mythic cards I want to use when I'm building new decks. I don't stress about it. I don't worry that I could have saved them a little bit longer and just got the cards from packs, because I'm happy with the number of decks that I make, and I'm happy just saving a few wild cards in case there's something I really, really need to make. But apart from that, I just spend them as I want to. But as long as you know, it is technically more efficient to wait longer. So in general, you want to save them. If you want to use them, it's not the end of the world. I wouldn't use all of them. So that's pretty much everything you're going to need to know about wildcards. You collect them from opening packs, mostly. You can buy them, but I wouldn't if you can avoid it. And you want to spend them on cards that are staples, that are going to be used in a variety of different decks. Ones, ideally, that aren't going to rotate anytime soon, because you're getting more time out of each wildcard you're spending. And you want to make sure that you're not just spending them all on cards that might work in some kind of janky combo deck that you're never going to use again, because that wild card's just wasted. So just be careful about how you spend them. Don't stress too much, and do whatever feels right for you. Okay, so that's all we've got to say on wildcards at the moment. I hope that was helpful for you. Let me know in the comments below if it was, or if you have any other tips for using wildcards I haven't mentioned. I think I've probably mentioned everything, but if I haven't, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching this one to the end. I will see you in the next one.